All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're back for another Bokeh Podcast episode, and I am here with a brand new guest. Unfortunately, we're not doing this in person, Shané, but Shané is here with me. Shané Gooding, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Bokeh Podcast today.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for having me. I'm very excited and geeking out.
Well, I know, and I was getting excited even just in our conversation before I started recording at the possibilities, really, of this conversation. And one of the things that kind of piqued my attention right away was you said that you are a people person, but you also consider yourself an introvert. And in our industry, we hear quite a bit from photographers who say that they are introverted, and they seem to kind of let that affect their ability to engage with clients or potential clients. So I'm curious how you balance those two ideas, being a people person, but also being an introvert. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, it's about connecting with people. And so since I'm more introverted, I'm used to listening. And so that's my skill set.
Okay.
And so I like listening to what clients have to say, to just what people have to say. And then I like asking and following up about, their life or whatever they're sharing at that moment. And so that's how I'm a people person, because I'm like genuinely interested in like the stories and the whys of, how we come to be who we are and, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm curious, and this is totally me projecting onto this conversation here, but one of the things that is I guess I used to I would have called myself in the past an introvert, just as a concept and the kind of the behavioral patterns. And I very much like you, I'd like to ask questions, and ideally deeper questions that could go beyond the surface and learn more about someone else on a deeper level. But what I also realized over time was that whether it was conscious or subconscious, by me focusing on asking somebody else questions, it kind of took the spotlight away from me and
exactly
took the kind of the need to perform or be an entertaining conversationalist or anything away from me and kind of put it on the other person. Have you found that yourself? And have you learned to be a little bit more of an extroverted conversationalist in that sense?
Well, exactly. I mean, that was the trick. I mean, that was like my secret sauce. It's just like, okay, to not have the spotlight on me, let me pay attention to them more so. However, as I've grown older in my years, you realize that, hey, this does need to be a bit more balanced, and it's okay for me to share. And so I think just time and feeling okay with being vulnerable of sharing pieces of myself, whether they are pros, cons, struggles, triumphs, whatever it may be of, I have to also share too, because that can enrich, not only the conversation, but potential, developing relationships and so forth. Yeah. So it is a given, you have to give as well as be able to receive.
Yeah. And to that point, it's interesting you say that, because I was given feedback and when it, I guess, first started happening, I didn't really realize what was being said, didn't learn from it at the time. But I think I was making some people feel a bit awkward, and that I was asking really good questions, and they were opening up in a way that they weren't used to opening up because they weren't used to being asked those kinds of questions.
Right.
But then they didn't really know how to respond in kind. So they felt super vulnerable because they just opened up all kinds of, gone really, really deep. And yet here I was not really saying anything because I didn't know how to ask questions in turn. So it is good to create that balance.
I would do the same exact thing, Nathan. It's just like, you get deep in this conversation. Then at a certain point, you can tell, that other person feels maybe a little bit awkward of just like, hey, we're getting a little deep here and I'm revealing things. I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
Your turn. Time for you to share. Like, let's share this a little bit.
Sure.
And so I get that. And the point is not to make someone feel vulnerable and uncomfortable.
Right.
It's just really trying to get to know someone because, by learning about other people and how they deal with things, I can also learn about myself.
Yes. Man, and I love this conversation already, and we're only 5 minutes in. So I have 2 tattoos. One on the inside of my right arm or wrist, and then another one on the left side as well. The one on the left side is 2 Japanese kanji characters that create the word kakushin, which is belief in Japanese. And one of the things that I realized is that if we are able to go deep in conversation with somebody else and learn the belief system of that individual, and I'm not talking about religious belief system necessarily. That could be part of it, certainly, but just the belief system. Literally everything that we do on a day-to-day basis is driven by a belief. Right now, I'm actually standing at a standing desk having this conversation with you, and I do so because I believe it gives me this sense of kind of a heightened energy versus sitting down and having the conversation. I'm going to sit on the couch because I believe it holds me up. So we do very mundane things rooted in beliefs. We also do more significant things rooted in beliefs, but if we're willing to have those conversations and go a little bit deeper and understand the beliefs that drive that individual, we can get to know them on a very, very deep level. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's fantastic because I do think energy is a real thing, in terms of just, you standing versus sitting. That's really, really true in terms of how energy transfers.
Sure.
Also, the energy that you pick up from people. And I know this may sound very hippie-ish and all that sort of thing, but you can sense and you can read and you can feel other people's energy towards you.
Sure.
And I think part of being an introvert and part of being a great listener is I'm very good at assessing this is not the day to maybe go into that type of conversation. Let's give them a little space. Or saying all right, let's do this. Or maybe I would feel more open to being vulnerable and suggest something. But that energy is a very, very real thing. And trying to create that positive energy, even as a business owner, that's also related to one's mindset. You have to keep positive things around you, your mentality, saying positive affirmations for yourself, whether you're reading books on business that will help motivate you. All of these things help get one geared up and continue to push forward.
It really can make a big difference. And we're going to actually, speaking of reading, we're going to talk about maybe a favorite book that you have here in just a few minutes. We're also, you mentioned business. We are actually here, believe it or not, for those of you listening in, we're here to talk about more than just psychology. Although I could do that for a very, very long time. I'm just so fascinated by it. But Shané has been gracious enough to join us today to talk about what she has learned as she has started a business relatively recently. And I was telling her before we got started recording that it's very relevant to me at this point because I'm getting ready to relaunch my photography business for a number of different reasons. But I'm kind of starting over. I'm hitting the reset button and getting to start a business with certainly different perspective than when I first started my photography business back in 2001 or 2002. So that's going to be super fun to have your perspective, Shané, today and very recent perspective as well about what it means to start a brand and what all is involved in that process. And I'm excited to share that information with our listeners. So I appreciate you being here. Before we get there, though, there are a few questions that I normally ask our guests. And the first one is about brand position, the value proposition, or hopefully the unique value proposition that your business offers to your market. I wonder if you can kind of describe that in one sentence.
Sure. So my business is called Imiivo, and it's a photography and video studio that specializes in family, beauty, and video portrait sessions. The goal is to help people tell the stories of their life by creating these photo and video portraits, just trying to let people be the hero of their own story.
Okay. And you actually have a version of what you just said on the homepage of your website. So for everybody listening in, if you just go to Imiivo, IMIIVO.com, you can actually see that statement there. By the way, talk to me about the name of the company. How did you come up with that?
Well, I wanted something that was one word. I wanted it to be, memorable for me, but I also like the idea of an acronym, deeper meaning. So something that stands for something. And so Imiivo is an acronym that stands for Infinite Memories In, Infinite Visuals Out. Because it's, it's the memories, it's the visuals, it's all related. And so, since I'm working in photo and video, how those two intersect, but really, kind of my niche here is really the storytelling. It's about the story behind the imagery and the video for me.
Well, and there are a couple of other things about this business name. First of all, I guess similar to Google, for example, Imiivo isn't a word that anybody knows or uses on a daily basis. So it's something unusual. It stands out and catches their attention, likely. It also happens to be super short, which is awesome for typing in a domain name. So I bet you were pretty excited about that as well. And likely you didn't have a whole lot of competition and people trying to buy that domain name.
Correct, correct. And that was all part of the strategy, but that was all part of, I mean, look, I'm kind of a nerd, so like I was doing the research and in terms of what stood out to me, what I liked and what resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to try to recreate that for my own business.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, for everybody listening in, if you just go to imiivo.com, IMIIVO.com, you can see Shané's site there. And then it's the same thing on Instagram as well, Imiivo on Instagram as well. But moving on to the next question, talk to me about customer experience. As cliche almost as this topic may seem to photography business owners, especially those who have established businesses in our industry, I still think it's important to keep that concept of great customer experience front and center. And I'm curious if there is a big idea thus far in your company that has driven a great customer experience.
Yeah, you can't underestimate the power of listening to your clients. Just that simple. And that's, again, where the some of that introversion plays a great role. So really listening to them and hearing what they want, where they're comfortable, where they may not be at ease. So that's before the shoot, during the shoot, even after the shoot, and so that could be from, hey, I'm having trouble downloading. This is really frustrating me. Or, on the shoot of just like, hey, it's cold in here. Or it's just like, oh, this is really exciting. Look at this space. I didn't know. I feel so special. Oh, I like this, I don't know, fan that you have blowing here, blowing my hair. Yeah. Or before the shoot of saying like, hey, I haven't seen, my grandmother in a few months, and, this is going to be our time to bond, so hearing, and it's just like, let's make this really special for her and her grandmother, because this is more than just them taking portraits together. It's about them connecting, reconnecting, and having a special time. And it's just centered around imagery.
What have you learned? I mean, has there been a particular conversation or two when listening to your clients, making that proactive effort of just listening? Has there been a particularly interesting conversation where you've learned something compelling that you then implemented in your business, not just with that client, but maybe with your clients from that point on?
That's a great question. I think maybe just some small details about their comfort level. That's a big deal for me, because I want to make sure that everyone is comfortable. So I really try to get to know the family or that individual a little bit deeper, so in terms of like, is there a favorite candy bar that you like? I mean, we could have that at the studio or, on set with us, or, is there a type of music that pumps you up? Like, what are the things that are going to make you feel relaxed and comfortable so that we can get those shots that aren't so forced and posed? So implementing that in terms of when I'm speaking to them, whether it's on the telephone or via email, of just trying to find out those little details, and they make a difference.
They really do. Speaking of details, though, I have to bring up one about you that very much resonates with me. You happen to enjoy gummy bears. Talk about that.
It's a problem, Nathan. It's actually a problem. Do you know, my brother and my nephew were in town just 2 days ago. They brought me, it's almost like a gallon Haribo bag of gummy bears.
No way.
This is January 8th. I wanted to try to start a cleanse and all this sort of things, but I have these gummy bears, and what am I supposed to do? I can't ignore the gummy bears.
Of course not.
So I have
that
to
would
handle
be wasteful.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do that. We don't waste. So it started in college because there was a corner store. I went to school in New York at NYU. And so on the corner, there's this store, and they had these delicious gummy bears. Now, in high school and middle school, I wasn't into gummy bears. So I don't know what happened, but since that moment on, I have just been into gummy bears.
Yes.
I can tell you the difference between the CVS brand gummy bears versus the Haribo gummy bears versus the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a problem. But I do enjoy it. And I actually, I gift that to my clients.
Now, see, that's smart. And I was going to actually mention, we at Photographer's Edit, my editing company, for the longest time, because we didn't have the internet that we do now, back when we started in 2008, things just looked different. and actually for some time after that. So we would actually ship images on hard drives back and forth, and as a way to, of course, get our clients' images and then be able to process them. When we'd ship a hard drive back, we'd put a small bag of Jelly Bellies in that box with the hard drive. Jelly Bellies happens to be my favorite kind of chewy fruit candy.
Yeah.
And it was fun just to have that little added personal touch. And it was also really cool to hear from clients how much they enjoyed that. And like you'd have people bring up the fact that there wasn't a pack of gummy or jelly beans in the box when you sent it back this time, because they were so used to it. But it's fun to do little things like that.
Exactly.
That's really, really great. Okay. So, well, again, I could also spend a lot of time talking about sweet things because I also enjoy them. I have to mention, you mentioned also enjoying homemade baked goods. And for anybody listening, if you actually go to the About page on Imiivo, you'll see some of these details I'm talking about. But my daughter made magic cookies just the other day. They were 7-layer cookies. It's just kind of my favorite.
Wow.
And they're a layered cookie that my mom used to make for me growing up. So there's nostalgia there as well. But I got COVID a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And unfortunately, it took away actually all of my taste for a little while there. And so she made these cookies and I could tell, you could sense the texture and the heat from them when they came out of the oven, but I didn't get any of the flavor. It was so frustrating.
Oh, that's cruel. That was almost like a cruel punishment.
Right? I know. It's kind of crazy. So I'm hoping that I get all of that taste back, or at least most of it back in the near future. And then I may beg her a little bit to make another batch for me. But yeah,
well, I'm glad you're on the road to recovery because you got to taste the baked goods, the magical cookies.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is kind of crazy how something like that, you're so used to having your taste or smell, and it goes away, and you realize the role that it plays in your day-to-day life in a way that you don't normally think about or process. And yeah, it's kind of a weird experience. But yes, very thankful for the fact that we're at least on the road to recovery in that regard. I want to keep going, though. There's something else that you mentioned actually on that list of kind of personal things. On your website, you said, I love making my little one laugh. And that's a really great segue to my next question, which has to do with time, because you're juggling family and business life. Is there a principle that's enabled you to be able to manage your time a little bit more effectively?
Well, it's something I'm working on because, I find myself working around the clock because I'm trying to really make Imiivo thrive. But I'm fortunate to have my 2-year-old son because he forces me to create these boundaries.
Yes.
And for me to be present and engaged with him. So when I'm with him, it's very minimal me phone scrolling, not on the computer at all, because I want him to have my undivided attention because I know that basically every moment that I'm not with him, I'm working on Imiivo. I'm doing something for the business. So I safeguard that time that I'm with him to just fully be there and be present. And I'm fortunate that now, just the last couple of months, daycares have opened up. I'm in the Maryland area, so he's able to go to daycare that affords me the opportunity to work. And he was going part-time, but, just this past week, he's going to go a bit more often. I also reserve Sundays for a day of rest,
Nice.
And just block that off. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes I find myself, photo calling or something like that, but I try as much as possible to just reserve Sundays. And, for personal care, that's, again, something I'm working on, but we can't neglect ourselves. And that's easy for me to do. So weekday mornings, at least a few weekday mornings, I try to reserve for working out.
Yeah.
And, I start and end my day in prayer, which, helps keep me grateful and centered.
Yeah. Yeah. That presence of mind, even for anyone who may not be religious, that effort at sitting down and just kind of being, number one, being present and certainly maintaining a mentality, a mode of thankfulness, it really does make such a huge difference. I still find myself, and I want to do all I can to maintain this, but I think a lot of it was the way that I was brought up. I was taught to say thank you just religiously. And that translated to, I think even as I became an adult and now I'm, 41, I still think I'm still saying thank you constantly, either out loud or internally being appreciative of things. And it really makes a big, big difference in the moment. And somebody, I think maybe it was even here on the podcast, just was recently saying, I think it was Sean, actually, my friend Sean Austin was on the podcast recently, and he was talking about the idea of, instead of saying, I have to do this thing, you say, I get to do this thing. And there's this shift with that one word that makes a big difference in your mentality and your psychology, which then kind of shifts your emotional state and just enables a better life as a result.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, because it's, I would tell my students this. It's easy for us to complain, or, I could have a list of 10 things, I'm sure we all could, of 10 things right now that maybe aren't going the way we expected them to, or, that may make us a little anxious, or it's, a thorn in our side. But I think it's a better practice to acknowledge and appreciate all the wonderful things that we take for granted. The fact that I am able to speak with you, I have this technology, I have this laptop. I mean, if you need to get just as detailed as possible, but just, start with that attitude of gratefulness, health, physical health, who you have in your world, your life. I just think it's important. So I agree with you.
It's so good. Again, it's another topic I could spend some time on, because I even think about the way that my girlfriend and I interact with each other. And we've been in a relationship now for, what is it? It's over 7 years, coming up on 8 years. And we still, just like we started, as if we had just started dating the other day, we still thank each other for things in an almost childlike way. But I think it just maintains the right mentality. And it's certainly in this case, in the context of the relationship, it really makes a big difference to maintain a level of appreciation for the other person in that context, or, whatever the situation it is that we're in. When I did get COVID, and it fortunately didn't affect me too significantly as far as symptoms outside of taste and smell. But then while I was able to be thankful for that, then simultaneously I was also able to kind of appreciate the experiences that I had with taste and smell, these senses in the past. And then certainly, of course, hope that it would come back, and it's slowly doing so. But maintaining that, it's super important. So I appreciate that reminder. That's really, really good. Talk to me about outsourcing or delegation. When we talk about time management, this is a really important topic. Is this something you've experimented with yet?
Well, I'm a true solopreneur at this time. So I'm not outsourcing or delegating quite yet, but I do have some things in mind in terms of, perhaps, photo editing. And hello, Nathan, I know.
I happen to know this great company. Yeah.
I know, right? So, but on photo shoots, I do have a former student who's been fantastic in assisting me with some photo shoots, and that's going great.
Oh, that really is nice. Even just to help with lighting or to carry a bag, that type of thing.
Right, exactly. And, I think it also provides, for some clients, not all, but for some clients, it makes you seem even more official. It's just like, oh, okay, this is serious business here. We got, someone helping with the lights here,
It does. It gives a little bit of an official stamp to the business. And it also just feels good to have somebody there to help you out. Well, that's cool. That's great. We mentioned books earlier. Talk to me about a super impactful business or a self-help book that you've read or listened to in the last few years. What comes to mind?
So over the summer, I read The Compound Effect, and I really enjoyed that by Darren Hardy. And I really enjoyed that because it was the reminder of consistency. Ooh. That was my biggest takeaway from that book. It's just that reminder of being consistent. And even if it is something small and little, so for instance, with sugar, how about instead of 2 bags of gummy bears a week, that's not what I do. But, instead of that, let's get it down to 1 bag. Just those small little changes, be consistent with that and just try that for, 5 weeks. Okay, you did that for 5 weeks. Now let's try another 5 weeks.
100%.
I found it quite impactful.
That's really good. Okay.
And applicable to many areas in your life.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, even the subtitle, I pulled it up here on Amazon. It says, Jumpstart your income, your life, your success. And it's so funny. I mean, we've really been able to relate on many things today. Something that really just hit home hardcore in 2020 for me was the significance of consistency on multiple levels of my life. And you're right. It's the little things many times that if we are just willing to show up and do consistently, that can really carry us over the long run. That's super important. So we're going to link to this book in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. And for anybody listening in, make sure that you do take advantage of the show notes. We're going to have the talking points from today's conversation, the resources that are mentioned, links to those at bokehpodcast.com. In addition, bokehbookshelf.com, just like it sounds. If you go there, Haley, who produces our show, has put together a collection of the most popular books mentioned here on the podcast. So if you're looking for other reading material as well, you can do that there at bokehbookshelf.com. All right, well, let's get to kind of the main conversation at hand. One of the things that was super compelling about today's conversation, and we chatted about this briefly before we got started, but you actually, prior to being a full-time photographer, were a professor. And I don't even know a lot of details about this. Can you talk a little bit about the background in that profession and how you then transitioned to photography?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a little backstory. My background's in film and television industry. So I used to work and intern at all sorts of various jobs.
Okay.
And then, that segued into me teaching film and television production courses at a local university or in DC. And that was going great. I thought that this is a great outlet for me. I really like the mentoring aspect with students and getting to teach something I'm so passionate about, which is that storytelling and image and how they intersect. And at the same time, I had my summers and I had winter breaks to exhibit my photography and video art, which I was doing a lot of.
Wow.
And then 2020 came around and, things changed. Like many others, I'm going through major life transitions right now. Unfortunately, at the beginning of 2020, my marriage came to an end. Then in May, my position as a professor came to an end. And I found myself a newly single mother working hard to support my toddler. Yeah. And to use that overused word of 2020, I had to pivot. Yeah. So I turned one of my dreams and passion projects into my business venture. And it was sooner than expected, but I launched Imiivo in September. And as scary as it is, Nathan, it is also thrilling, invigorating, and empowering. I mean, it is a grind every single day, but it's worth it. And so the role of business owner is one I'm growing into, and I'm learning a lot from.
Okay, but first of all, congratulations. And that might seem kind of trite, but really, truly, I'm excited for you. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited for you is because you did what a lot of people might talk about. You've actually done it, right? So, a lot happens in 2020 that is, just to put it very simply, overwhelming on multiple levels. And despite that, then you're like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm going for it. And you took that leap. And here you are. I just think that's super exciting. And I would assume that you'd probably be the first person to say you didn't take that leap knowing and understanding every single thing that you needed to do. You just knew you had to take the leap. Am I assuming correctly?
Oh, that is a very fair and accurate assumption. It's one of those things when your back is against the wall. Yeah. And I simply had to do. I had to be on go mode. I had no choice. And that served to my benefit because I am over analytical. I'm a creative perfectionist. And so if I had the luxury of time, who knows how long it would have taken me. Yeah.
Sometimes we just need the little push.
Right.
And again, to your credit, you actually then responded and made the thing happen. You did, as you put it. And I think that's such an important word as well. We have to do, and then we have to do consistently. And here you are. So again, kudos to you. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And I want to get into the things that you have learned thus far. And let's start actually with things that new photographers in particular, shouldn't do. What are the big ideas that you would want to say to new photographers? Please make sure that when you're starting that business, you don't do these things.
Okay, so I have 5. And we're going to start with what I was just talking about. So for all my over analytical perfectionist creatives, stop. Just stop. And I'm speaking as a recovering over analytical perfectionist myself.
Yes.
I would say just put it out there and you will fine tune along the way. And also when you put it out there, you will actually see what needs maybe your clients or who you're serving, what they actually need. So you can adjust as you go along. Number 2, when writing website copy, cut the fat. People aren't invested in the verbose, flowery language we may want to use on our website. They want to know how this relates to them. Can this benefit them? Can this motivate or encourage them? And can this solve a problem for them?
I love that. I'm frantically taking notes actually as you're talking. I don't normally use a pen and paper, but I definitely do during the podcast. So I'm frantically taking notes. But that is so good because you're right. There is so much that we as photographers care about for ourselves, whether we'll consciously admit that or not, and for the sake of our fellow photographers who we think might come to our site. But the reality is that potential client, in many, if not most cases, doesn't actually care about all those details you just shared about your career. They just want some great images and a great experience. Right. And I think we need to focus more on that.
Right. Nor do they care about the type of high resolution image. Is it going to be a TIFF file? Is it going to be, they don't care,
No.
So it's like, you just got to cut some of the fat
That's good.
Number 3, when you start, you may feel the need to take on gigs that don't suit your brand or your strength or your niche. But I would warn against, being a generic practitioner. And that's easier said than done. It really is because, you're trying to survive and make money. But for example, if your niche is proposal sessions, let's say, and you keep on accepting newborn gigs, people are going to associate you as a newborn photographer. So you want to just try to avoid boxing yourself in to things that really aren't your niche or your strength or what you want your brand to be.
Yeah, that's so true. And the other part of that too, and I've mentioned this on podcasts before, is if you do kind of present yourself as a generic photographer, the thing that used to happen to me, I'd go to these networking meetings when I was shooting actively, and there would be other photographers in the room, and they would get up and introduce themselves, and they'd say, I'm so-and-so, and I specialize in, and they'd list like 4 or 5 different types of photography. I'm like, well, they lost you already because you don't actually specialize in 4 or 5 different types of photography. You are just a, quote, photographer now in the mind of the potential, business associate, somebody that you can partner with in business in some form or fashion. So specialization really makes a big difference. I'm curious though on that, I'm sure there's some apprehension about, okay, I need to now get as much business as possible. Have you found a balance between specialization and then also going ahead and taking a couple jobs here and there? Or have you just been super strict about it?
I'm also working on this myself. So, I'm not speaking as I'm the super authority. Some of these things I still have to work on.
Sure.
I am very verbose when it comes to website copy, for instance, but I'm really cutting the fat. And in terms of taking on gigs that aren't my niche, I have, but I've been pretty good about like, hey, this is what I do best. So if you want my best, this is what I can do for you.
Sure, yeah.
So, I know that, newborn photography, that's not my wheelhouse necessarily. I can do it, but, if you really want to see something that's going to complement who you are, then let's stick with, my niche here. But that is something that I'm also working on myself because, again, with launching, you're trying to get as many clients as possible within reason so that they can also spread the word for you. So it's a tricky balance. It is a tricky balance. But on your website or on your social media sites, I would avoid advertising for these other subgenres of photography. At the very least. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a nice balance. And you're right too, that you can actually present specializing in a particular genre and still offer the service too. This is something I think that's come up in the podcast before, but for example, those who might specialize in wedding photography, naturally their clients might come to them about engagement photography if that's not already being offered as part of the package. They may later come to them for family photography or baby photography. And that's something that you could still do to make some income and yet not put it out there as your specialty. And so now your brand is maintained while you're still able to generate a bit of additional income here and there.
Right, exactly. And so you would not put the engagement photos or the family photo sessions on your website if you want, your wheelhouse is wedding photography. But that one-off that, all right, I'll make the exception.
Sure. Okay, so I've been, like I said, taking notes here. So the first thing was to stop trying to be perfect, which I think is a great reminder for everybody, including myself, by the way. Again, you and I think, are very much on the same page here. Do keep an open mind and adjust as you go, but you just got to do it at some point. So that's a great reminder. Simplify the copy on your site, or just if we're going to stick with the don't talk too much. That's good. And then don't be a generic practitioner. What's number 4?
Number 4, it's easy to get caught up in buying all the templates, the systems, the software, the contracts, the tools, the equipment, 10 computers for future employees that you don't even have in mind.
Yeah.
But don't. Yeah. Which leads to number 5, avoid business debt. Because you want to be profitable. And so what prevents you from being profitable is if you're already starting, with this negative debt. Yeah. Behind you. So avoiding business debt. And there is a way to do that. And you can start low budget. A photography business, you can. If you own a camera, sometimes even if you don't.
No, I think that's a great reminder. And in fact, as I do start my own photography business back up, one of the things I'm doing very intentionally is to keep it super, super, super cheap. I mixed cheap and simple there, but both simple and cheap. And doing that intentionally because I want to prove the very concept that you're talking about, Shané. And I think it's a really great reminder for all of us. We don't have to have the fanciest thing or all the things. We just need a decent camera body, a couple of lenses, and a backup body of some kind, and a couple of flashes. It's really, and these flashes. I just bought a couple of Godox flashes for this business. Yeah, and you're talking what, like $125 a piece? It's super inexpensive,
right?
Which is brilliant, and there's just no need to go over the top with it.
Indeed.
That's really, really good. Okay, so we have a lot to talk about, Sid. Let's keep going. What do you feel then, kind of moving in a more proactive direction, what do you feel are the major steps then to launching a photo business?
All right, I have a lot of these, but I'm just going to keep it to 5.
Okay.
So number 1 is you want to create a one-pager about your business. And this is to help you be extremely clear about what your business is.
Yes.
What your niche is, your differentiator. Another thing is who you serve, that ideal client. Who are you trying to get in the door?
Yeah.
Another thing is why you care to serve them. And this relates to what your mission is. And another thing, how you do it. How are you going about this?
Yep.
Also helpful is having a log line and an elevator pitch. Because people will ask you, hey, what do you do? Da-da-da-da. And you want to be able to know off the top of your head and spit it out. This is what I do. This is who I serve.
Yeah, and do it, as you pointed out, and with relatively few words, because people lost interest 10 seconds ago, and
right.
And it's very easy to go on. I think part of that, though, that happens, and tell me what you think, Shané, I think a lot of times photographers, or maybe any other business owners, they start rambling on because they haven't actually taken the time to do the very thing that you just talked about, which is sit down and write this out and be clear about what it is that they're doing, why they're doing it, who they're reaching out to. Because they haven't, then they're essentially thinking out loud when the person asks them what they do.
Right. And you don't want to be muffled and jumbled, and, you want to specify and you want to hone in your service as much as possible. You really want to be the expert in your niche.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so start with creating that one pager about your business. That's brilliant. What's next?
Number 2, know thy numbers. So you want to create a budget, even if you're feeling like, I don't know what I'm budgeting for. We can talk about later, but you want to create a budget for yourself.
Yeah.
Number 2, the other bullet point with know thy numbers is your finances. How much do you have? How are you going to be organizing your money? the bank accounts that you may have open.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Your process for tracking your operating expenses that relates to your budget, your process for paying bills. And another thing to add to knowing thy numbers is before launching, I would highly suggest, especially if you are taking the risk of going full time. I shouldn't say risk, but if you are being a spearheader and going full time, how about that?
There you go. Frame it in a really positive way.
Right. You want to have 6 months of income, of emergency income for your business only to keep you afloat.
Yeah, I mean, we were all kind of hit with that realization in a hard way this last year too, and
right.
It's easy in the moment when things are going okay that you don't have the pressure to put that money away, but then you hit those hard times and now you're stuck, and then you're distracted from trying to continue to maintain the business or even potentially build the business during those times because you're so stressed out about your finances. So
right.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I'm curious actually, because I know that we could do a whole podcast on this, but just very briefly, if you don't mind, what platform or platforms, software are you using to manage your finances in the way that you were just describing here? Because I know this was an overwhelming thing for me when I was younger and shooting. And I know it's an overwhelming idea for new business owners as well. What do you do?
So I actually, again, my nerdy self, I created my own Excel sheet.
Okay.
And I have many sub-sheets within a workbook.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I signed up for, the free trial for QuickBooks.
Yep.
But I found myself using my own Excel sheet a little bit more
than
QuickBooks. So that's how I manage it.
Is it just because it felt comfortable or familiar, or why do you think?
Because with QuickBooks, you have to set it up so that every expense that's going out, it's just the coding that you have to do and the tagging and the categorizing.
Okay.
And so I was like up and running already. And so I already developed this system that was a little bit faster for me to input through Excel than to take out, an extra 10 minutes via QuickBooks. But QuickBooks is helpful. But to be honest with you, I don't know if I would use QuickBooks in the future. I know that sounds so horrible, but we'll see. Because what's working for me right now is the Excel sheet.
No, I get it. Sometimes, there are more moving parts in a piece of software than necessary, and it is going to depend on the person and the business. But I actually am likely going to be using FreshBooks myself, and their UI and design, because I'm a bit of a nerd myself, is a bit more appealing. It's more minimalistic, simple, clean, and in some ways maybe a bit more intuitive as well. They also had mileage tracking built in, and I think the version of QuickBooks that I was using didn't. So that was another thing. Anyway, there were ultimately reasons for me moving in that direction. I think that's the way that I'm going to go. I've never been a good... In fact, I know very little about Excel spreadsheets, and I know endless numbers of people use them, and they're super powerful in the end because I've seen them at work, but I would be so clueless trying to put one together. So props to you for knowing these things, because I just don't know.
Well, but you know what? Once you have, I created something, with the formulas, and trust me, I'm a creative, so numbers and math and all that sort of stuff, you're starting to speak Greek to me.
Yeah.
However, it is important. And so like, once you have these things already set up, then all it is kind of just plugging in numbers. That's it.
Okay.
That's it. So it just makes it pretty seamless. But I need to check out FreshBooks. Because the way you described it, a nice, simple interface, that's more my speed.
Yeah. I have to say, when I first started using QuickBooks back in 2000, I don't know what it was, 3, 4, and you had to actually, install it with disks on your computer. And, and then if you wanted to get information to your accountant, you also had to export that information to, burn it to a CD or something like that and take it to them. They've come so far since then, and they're certainly way more user-friendly now. So I would suggest it to people. But yeah, FreshBooks it just kind of simplifies things, and in a way it kind of minimizes the number of moving parts for the sake of ease of use. So I definitely recommend it. But okay, so we've got, first of all, creating that one page about your business. Be clear about your brand, your mission, your target market. know your numbers. What's number 3?
Register your business with Google.
Okay.
Yeah, they will mail you through the mail, a PIN. And so you will enter that PIN. But this is going to allow you to show up, with SEO even more so. The reviews will show up right in the right-hand side, when someone's Googling your business.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I was surprised at the significance of this. We hadn't really spent a lot of time talking about this, but Haley, who produces our show, actually came on the show a little while back, not very long ago, actually, and talked about this very thing. So we're going to actually link to that episode in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com for everybody who's listening in. It is funny that they actually send it to you in the mail, though. What's that about?
Right. I know.
All right. What's number 4?
Number 4 is you want to open a business bank account. You want to keep your money separated for your business. And some of your bank institutions, they will require a minimum, but that's okay. So I would say do it. And once you start to really grow, you might think about opening up additional accounts, like a tax account. Account just for your operations, an account, it could be a savings account just for your profits. And then obviously you will have your personal account for whenever you do decide to take an income.
Yeah, because it's easy too. If you only have, let's just say you have your personal checking account, and then you have one business account, and everything for expenses, taxes, et cetera, everything goes in that one account. And it's easy to just look at that one lump sum and be like, oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Exactly.
And kind of forget about the fact that, 20% of this needs to go here, and then another 15 needs to go there, and 30 needs to go here. And so that's good. Yeah. Keeping
exactly. So it's just a way to automate in a sense, and to take the thinking out of it. I mean, as a business owner, you will have so many departments and areas that you are trying to handle and stay on top of. Yeah. So let's not add the burden of wait a minute, did I take the 20% out of that session and Yep. I say just eliminate that. So having a tax account, an operations account, a profit account, that makes it a little bit more simple.
Okay. And then number 5, what's that last one?
You want to develop your back end before you launch. And by back end, I mean picking your platforms, so your website, your CRM, your project management apps, setting up your social media, and also creating your workflows. You want to have all of that developed. So all the back end things that none of your clients will know about nor care about, you want to have that set up before you launch. Therefore, when you launch and you have clients coming in the door, let's say you're having a great month and you are being flooded with lots of inquiries. That's a great thing for you. You don't want to be overwhelmed by it. So when you have these things all set up for yourself, then you're ready to go.
That is huge. And actually it's a segue to my next question. And I guess, first of all, the point about the significance of systems, you're so right. I remember back when I got started as a photographer, I just got started. And I really had no perspective and certainly minimal understanding, if any at all, about the significance of systems and putting those systems in place and how down the road it makes things so much easier. When you hear about photographers that are spending hours and hours and hours and hours working on their photography business every week, it's a pretty obvious indication, I would say probably 95% of the time, that they don't have great systems in place. The average professional photographer, once they get their systems in place and their business running, should be able to get done what they need to within 20 or 30 hours a week, easy in some cases. And but if you don't have the systems in place, it complicates things, more moving parts, more to keep up with, more to think about. And now you're spending, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100% more time on your business than you need to because those aren't in place. One of those things that you actually mentioned, Shané, is a CRM. I'm curious what your experience has been looking for a CRM, maybe experimenting with a couple of them, and what you ended up landing on.
Yes. So with CRMs, this is going to take that headache. That's going to take the headache away because you don't want to be stressed out, and then the joy of actually creating is gone for you. So that's why you do want to have, a CRM, which stands for Client Relationship Management. And so I tried a couple at first, and then I landed on Honeybook. I thought at first it was just for wedding photographers, but their platform is applicable to a broader range of photographers and, dare I say, other, creative service providers. So with HoneyBook, what I found is that it was user-friendly, it was intuitive, an organized interface. It also includes, when someone's paying you directly through HoneyBook, you can just see your P&L, so that's profits and losses, right there. So lots of nice organized things, and I'm about organization systems, clearly.
Yeah.
But it just makes it just so simple. They also have a lot of ready-made templates that you can tweak for your own liking. They also have workflows and scheduling. So they have lots of tools and applications for you to implement all in one place, one platform, and taking that time in the beginning to set up your automations and your workflows and your emails, whatever your templates are, it's going to save you so much time and it's going to save the headache, and you will just be rolling. When those clients come in, you're going to be rolling.
Well, that's really good. We'll link to HoneyBook in the show notes as well. One of the things I've been impressed with when I've taken the time to look at HoneyBook in the past is what seemed to be very similar to what I was talking about with FreshBooks, kind of minimal number of moving parts, not super overwhelming, well-designed, relatively user-friendly. And so we'll link to that in the show notes. If those of you listening in, if you don't have a CRM right now, you're not happy with the one that you're currently using, make sure to check that out. We've had Natalie Frank, who is one of the founders of the Rising Tide Society, has been involved with HoneyBook, who acquired the Rising Tide Society, has been on the show in the past. So shout out to Natalie as well. But we'll link to HoneyBook in the show notes. We're going to talk about marketing on a budget next. But before we do that, maybe we could start with just general concepts that will enable photographers to save a bit of money as they're starting out. What are the most important in your mind?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I have 5 of these.
Okay.
First, you want to utilize the plethora of free sources that are out there. So that's podcasts like the Bokeh Podcast, that's YouTube, that's a number of articles, and also the library. Guys, the library is not dead. So that's for, that's for reading these classic books that are often mentioned on, the Bokeh Podcast. And, so utilize that. The second would be utilize free trials, because like, for instance, with the CRM, luckily I did a free trial of, one of the competitors first, and it was just so complicated and wonky, and I just did not enjoy. Thank goodness I did not, invest that money into that. So utilize the free trials. Number 3, if you need a studio space, find a co-share space, to keep your costs a bit low. For instance, I use a studio space, but what I did is on Craigslist, believe it or not, I share a space with a yoga studio.
Oh, cool.
And it works perfectly, so I have the high ceilings, there's enough ventilation, windows, so it works really, really well. And that keeps costs very, very low.
Oh, that's great. And maybe get an extra yoga session in here and there too.
Right. Number 4, we were talking about equipment and everything earlier. You can rent your equipment. Rent your equipment or purchase used equipment, purchase used lenses. I used to do this all the time. I mean, I still do that. I still rent equipment. And so that's another way of keeping costs low, because a lot of these mirrorless cameras and the mirrorless lenses, they cost some serious coins.
Yes.
So let's not invest that money up front before you really have it. Rent it, see if you actually like working with it, and build up your profit. And once you have the funds to pay cash for it, then you can invest in it.
Do you have a rental company that you've used you'd recommend?
So I've used, I think it was Lens to Go.
Yes.
They did fail me one time in terms of not getting the equipment to me on time before a shoot. But overall, they're pretty good. I've used a few others, and I can't remember the names off the top of my head. But they're pretty comparable to each other. But the Lens to Go is it's decent.
And do you recommend any particular company for buying used equipment?
For buying used equipment, there was a local shop that I used to purchase from. But in terms of mainstream nationally, B&H Photo does have a used section. Okay. And also Adorama has a used section.
Interesting.
So, yes, exactly.
I don't think I realized that. That's pretty cool.
Yes. So check those out.
I used to buy, we actually bought quite a bit of used equipment and then sold to them, I guess, as well, from a company called KEH. They were based in Atlanta. I think still are based in Atlanta, KEH.com. And I was super impressed with the rating system that they implemented for the equipment. It was very specific, and probably 90% of the time or even more, what I got from the company when I ordered it, the equipment looked even better in some cases than what they were actually saying it was. So it was very, very reliable. So I'll throw that into the mix too. And we'll put all of these in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com for everybody listening in. All right. So saving money, utilize free resources, find a co-share space and rent equipment, purchase used equipment. There was a fifth.
Yeah. So the fifth one is, here's some things to avoid. So I would want you to avoid the following: paying for expensive legal contract templates. Not necessary. Okay. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so don't sue me. But there are, so for instance, they have CRMs that have legally binding contracts that you can tweak to your liking. Now, of course, you may want to have a lawyer look at it to make sure that it's legally binding, but they pretty much are. I shouldn't say pretty much, they are. So
we want to be careful with this. Yeah.
Exactly. But to be safe, always have a lawyer check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, avoid paying for the expensive legal contract templates. Another thing to avoid is paying for any expensive templates. It's not necessary. There's so many resources out there. Also, paying too much for ads when you're starting out. You want to test the waters. So for instance, maybe let's say Instagram is more where your ideal client lives than Facebook. Mm-hmm. Well, that means you don't want to spend an arm and a leg on Facebook ads when really you should be looking at Instagram ads. Mm-hmm. And another thing is just paying too much for educational courses or programs at first. Now, the keywords is too much at first, because I think education is important, but you want to avoid, getting in the trap of paying for so many things up front that that you just don't have the budget for.
Well, and that, by the way, you can either Google or search on YouTube and get for free too. There's
exactly
so much information out there to take advantage of. You gave us bonus stuff here. I mean, we got so many different. This is good. I said utilize free resources, and I actually wrote that down twice earlier. It was free resources, free trials was the second thing. Find a co-share space, rent equipment or purchase used equipment, find inexpensive templates, avoid paying too much for ads. And to your point, Shané, I'm glad that you bring it up. Definitely test those out, spend a little bit, see what converts, what doesn't, make adjustments to your earlier point. And then avoid paying too much for educational resources. Okay. Man, I'm so impressed because there's just so much practical information here for a new photographer. I really, really, truly appreciate this. Let's talk specifically about budget as it relates to marketing. Yes. What are a few ways that photographers can make sure they maintain a tight budget when they're trying to market or promote their new business?
When you're first starting out, let's keep this simple. Call on your village. So, even if it's Bob that you haven't talked to in a year or two, you never know. So, let everyone know what you're doing, what you're up to, and ask them to spread the word. Yeah. And so, a second part to that, or number two, is give people an incentive to spread the word about your business and to follow you on social media. So that could be through freebies. That could be through giveaways. That could be through some sort of a client referral incentive program. So think of those creative ways where people will have an incentive to spread the word for you.
Okay.
And lastly, I would say good old-fashioned yard signs, flyers, and business cards. Those haven't gone away. No, not fully. Not yet, Nathan. They're still around.
Yard signs. I don't know that I've heard any photographer mention yard signs on the podcast. Have you?
Yard signs. I did yard signs for a holiday mini session.
No way. That's cool.
Yeah. Number one, it was a fun practice putting them up all around Maryland.
Yeah.
But two, people are looking at that. They're driving, they see the little yard signs, and, so it works. Now, did it convert, a great amount of inquiries and leads for me?
Yeah.
Not quite, but
but it was fun doing it.
It was fun doing it, and it did actually get the word out. So I did notice a bump in terms of website, who was going on the website around that time.
Okay, so a bit of brand awareness, maybe.
Exactly. Brand awareness. Now, and so also with business cards, so for instance, if you're going to the doctor's office, we have the tricky situation right now with COVID restrictions and social distancing. But let's say you're going to the doctor's office or to a restaurant that you frequent, you can always ask the manager, hey, do you mind if, I leave a couple of business cards next to the cash register? You never know. You never know if someone's going to say, yeah, that's fine.
Why not ask? Doesn't hurt anything, right?
Why not?
Yeah. You mentioned the first thing in that list of three there, the significance of community. And I want to end with this question. Let's talk a little bit about the way that community has played a role in the development of your business so far. What has that meant to you, and what has it ultimately done for your business?
Community is really huge because, and I'm learning that more. One of the big things I would say about it is staying connected. We're not in this world alone. And sometimes as introverts or creatives, we can isolate or want to stay in our creative bubbles, but it's important to be connected and be engaged in whatever communities best speak our language. And, so I'm part of this Mocha Mom group, and they knew my recent backstory and they connected with my story. And so for that, they wanted to support me as an individual. But what that did is that also helped spread the word because they were very pleased with their product and excited about their images. So while they were helping me, they actually became excited about their own images. And so that was great. It was like a win-win, basically.
Yeah.
Also photography groups, that we're not each other's competition, but we can be each other's network. So photography groups are helpful because they provide that support, resources, knowledge. So for instance, you're like, I want to use a 35 millimeter lens, but how do I use it? Another photographer, I'm sure will know, some of these questions that you may have. Also, photography groups are great for encouragement and accountability. That is key. Accountability, if you follow through. So I've also found podcasts to be a community, and especially this podcast, Nathan, the Bokeh Podcast has been something that I've been listening to, and I've learned so much from it. It's like valuable takeaways. So, while it's not interactive necessarily, that's still creating a community.
I'm so glad. And I have to reiterate again, you don't know how much I appreciate the fact that you are providing so much practical information. I know that some shows are more conversational and kind of geared toward entertainment, and that's great. I need that sometimes too. But there's when we have limited time to allocate toward our education, if we're going to spend it, I would hope that we're able to spend it on resources that don't give us a bunch of fluff and leave us, wishing that there was something more. A lot of business books, unfortunately, that's kind of the thing. It's like 85% fluff, and then the 15% the stuff that you can actually go do something with. And we've really made an intentional effort here at the show to make sure, even if you only listen to the first 5 minutes, you're still listening to responses from our guests that ultimately lead to information that is actionable. We talk about brand position or something that you can do to make your client experience better. But I have to say that you are just this brilliant example of somebody who is sharing practical, actionable information and just the best way. So thank you for that. And for those of you listening, especially those that are new to the business, don't just listen to this and say that's nice, but listen to what Shané is saying and go do something with it, because that's where the value ultimately lies.
Oh, I appreciate that, Nathan. And like you're saying, to your point, you can get caught up in that with some of these educational courses where it's more filler than practical takeaways.
Yes.
And guides and step twos. Yeah.
And it's not about, I'll also say this too, Shané, because, some of these things that we're talking about here, in fact, many, if not most of these things that we're talking about here, it's not that they're earth-shattering concepts that no one has ever heard about before.
Right.
It's that if you do them, you will have results. Just simple as that. And unfortunately, it's easy for us to overlook the simple things, as we were talking about earlier, and do them consistently, which will lead to results. for the sake of, where's this really cool big idea that I've never heard about before and it gets me really excited and my favorite photographer does it and so I should go try it too, rather than just focusing on being consistent with a few small things. Right. It's the basic things that we do consistently that ultimately, at least based on, especially this last year, we were talking about consistency, that I've realized, and certainly if we look around at successful business owners, I think that they have proven that the small things consistently is what ultimately makes the big difference. So I wanted to emphasize that, but this has been brilliant. So you talked about the various networking groups, podcasts, anything else that you would throw out there as far as community and how it relates to your business?
Yeah, the last thing I would add is, something that I've really learned is, just the great importance of giving back and serving my community as well. And this can be done in so many ways, offering a free session, donating some prints, teaching a workshop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's importance in giving back too.
There is, and it feels good. I mean, I know that's kind of selfish too, but it just feels good to actually do something for someone else. And not just make it about ourselves. Right. Well, this has been, I've just really enjoyed this, Shané, and I can't thank you enough for making time for all of us. And will you just kind of remind everybody where they can find you and follow you online?
Absolutely. And first, I would really, really like to thank you again, Nathan, for giving me an opportunity and this platform to talk about these things. I think it's really, really cool, and I'm humbled and grateful that you're having me on today.
It is truly our privilege, and I don't just say those words. Really, I truly appreciate it as well, and I will project the appreciation of our audience in your direction as well.
So here's where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. You can find me at Imiivo. That's IMIIVO. That's it. Website, same thing. IMIIVO.com. And in addition to my portrait photography service, I am going to be expanding and helping creative solopreneurs get organized before launching their first business. So, you can go to my website and sign up, because I'm going to be offering a launch a business kit and a launch a business boot camp soon. So you can sign up so you can stay informed about it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm here on the site now, and it is just that, launch a business kit and launch a business boot camp coming soon. Cool. And you can sign up there. So we'll link to all this in the show notes, bokehpodcast.com. For everybody listening in, again, take advantage of the resource, which are the show notes from these episodes, the talking points, the resources that have been mentioned. And Shané, just once again, thanks for making time to hang out with all of us.
Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. Make sure to visit our sponsors, photographersedit.com, custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu.com, that's MIILU.com, the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.